Hello.
Welcome back to the Space School. Look at the listeners, PPSW, your favorite hangout place. Today we're back with a brand new Star Wars story. Today we're going to venture into what would have happened had Luke turned his father to the light side of the Force before they faced the Emperor. Would Vader and Luke be able to stop the Emperor, or would they fall victim to Sidious' power? Before we begin this video, special thanks to Cameron Hall for writing and fulfilling this entire story. This is an absolute amazing job with this. And before we begin this video, let's smash that like button, try and shoot 2,000 likes in the first 24 hours, and I'll release what if the Grand Master of the Order, Master Yoda, trained Anakin Skywalker. This is a video you definitely don't want to miss. We're also getting 50,000 subscribers, so join the Space School and be part of our incredible journey here together. If you have ideas for videos, leave them down below. I read all your comments, but I don't do crossovers. And one last thing, if you want to support the channel, check out the Patreon, Twitch, and community Discord. Special shout out to George Story, Benjamin Wells, Gort, Chancellor Lawrence Sanders for being Grand Tier supporters, and Jay Hoffman, Icy Raptor, Warpippin 308 as Master Tier supporters on our Patreon. Thank you all for supporting the channel. You guys are helping fund massive projects. I just saw the rough draft of one of them, and I'm so very excited for you guys to see the final result. And also, if you want to learn how to win a free Sideshow collectible, watch the end of the video and I will tell you how. Our story begins on the forest moon of Endor, where the rebel forces have been captured by a local tribe of Ewok natives. After the Ewoks nearly kill and eat the captured rebels, only saved by the Ewoks' belief that C-3PO was a powerful god with magical powers, Luke takes a moment away in thought on the outskirts of the treetop village. When his mind is in mild meditation, he is interrupted by Leia's sudden presence next to him. Luke reveals to her that Vader is on the moon. He can sense it. He tells her that he needs to turn himself in, for the safety of not just the rebels, but for the safety of his friends. He also reveals to Leia that something that she knew for the longest time, but never really acknowledged, and that was the fact that they were siblings. And even more than that, Vader was their father. When Leia tells Luke not to go, and telling him to flee far away from Vader, Luke would rebuttal that by telling her that there was good in him, telling her that he felt it and sensed it throughout the Force, knowing that he could turn him back to the good side of the Force. With this, he kisses Leia on the cheek and walks away, leaving Leia in shock of what she had just come to know. Luke departs the Ewok village and turns himself into an Imperial unit, who takes him to a nearby landing bay controlled by the Empire. Shortly after, Vader arrives via shuttle to retrieve his son. The Imperial commander hands Luke's lightsaber as well as Luke off to Vader, before continuing his search for the rebels on the ground. As the two, father and son, walk to the shuttle, Vader sees that finally he has accepted the truth that he is in fact Vader's son. Luke, wanting to engage with his father more, stops in his walk and calls Vader by his former name, that being the name of Anakin Skywalker. He tells his father that there is still good in him, that the Emperor hasn't still driven it from him yet. That is why Vader hasn't destroyed him, and that is why he never will be able to. Vader ponders for a moment, observing Luke's new lightsaber. He thinks to himself about Padme, and how, even after knowing about his slaughter of the Jedi in the temple, she still saw the good in him. But Vader pulls himself away from these thoughts. That was the old him. Anakin was gone. Vader was all that remained. And his attachments to Padme were in the past. Luke, sensing this, asks his father to join him, to come back to the light, to do good for the galaxy, and Vader can only rebuttal, telling Luke that Obi-Wan once thought as he did. That he never understood the true power and the true nature of the dark side. Luke tells him that if he doesn't turn, he will be forced to kill him. Luke tells him to let go of his hate, saying that he feels the conflict within Vader, and that he senses the good within him. Vader can only say that it was too late for him. He is cut off by Luke, who tells him that it was never too late for anybody. He will always have the heart of Anakin Skywalker within him. Vader would be very irritated by this and wave over a duo of stormtroopers to escort Luke to the second Death Star, but Luke stops him. He puts his hand on the shoulder of his father and asks about his mother, asking who she was and what she was like. Vader pushes Luke's hand off of him, turning away from his son, and the name Padme rings out of his mouth. Luke is curious because he didn't know that was her name. Prodding his father further, Vader nods, and tells Luke that she was a beautiful woman, and he cared so deeply for her, and he would have given up everything for a chance to save her. He literally did. Vader explained that he was the one who ended her life on Mustafar all those years ago. In his rage, he killed the only person he ever truly loved. He didn't yet acknowledge it, but this fact had haunted every moment of his life since. After a moment, Vader walks to the elevator shaft, Luke following him. "Enough of this. I will take you to the Emperor myself," Vader tells Luke. On the way up to the landing bay, Luke asks Vader why he would have done it. Why did he kill her? And the only thing he can do is blame Obi-Wan. Luke thinks for a moment. He asks if Obi-Wan turned Padme against him, or if the Emperor turned him against Padme. The elevator drops open, but Vader freezes. He never thought of it from this point of view. The idea that he had been manipulated never really crossed his mind. As quickly as this train of thought started, it stopped. It was too late for Vader. That was the only thing he could think of. Padme was gone 20 years before, and it was time for him to move on. Vader escorted Luke to the shuttle, which lifted off and departed for the second Death Star up above. En route to the space station, Vader thinks back to the memories he had of Padme. Memories he had been blocking out for almost more than 2 decades. They all flooded back into his mind. The first time they met on Tatooine, where he asked her if she was an angel, or the time he saved her from the bounty hunters, or their time on Naboo rolling through the grass, and their countless missions during the Clone Wars. He feels joy for the first time since becoming Vader. He realizes that Luke is so much like his former wife. All these feelings, though, vanish as the ship docks within the Death Star, and both father and son feel the cold darkness that is Emperor Palpatine. As the two make their way to the throne room, the dark presence of Sidious becomes stronger. Luke, having not said a word to his father since their departure from Endor, stops in his tracks, asking Vader one last time to come back to the light side, to see the goodness within himself, and to turn away from the Emperor once and for all. Vader would stay silent, and Luke would be pulled along. When they arrived in the throne room, Palpatine is sitting, waiting. Luke and Vader approach, and the Dark Lord of the Sith sinisterly welcomes Luke Skywalker. He uses the Force to undo the restraints around Luke's wrists, telling the Imperial guards to leave them. Vader hands the Emperor Luke's weapon, as Luke tells Sidious that he would never turn to the dark side as his father had done. Palpatine laughs maniacally, informing Luke that the rebels were walking into a trap that he himself orchestrated, and that this battle would be over shortly. That was pointless to resist. As the battle in space begun, Luke watched from the Death Star in anger. He looks to his lightsaber in longing, and Palpatine encourages him to take it and strike him down, to use his anger as hate and power to fuel him. The rebel fleet continues their attack, confused as to why the Imperial Star Destroyers are holding their fire. Palpatine tells Luke to watch outside, calling Luke his young apprentice in a way to mock him, as he orders the Death Star commander to open fire on the rebel cruisers. The rebels take heavy damage, and Luke watches. His anger grows as he takes his lightsaber. He moves to strike at Palpatine, but Vader blocks his strike. As the father and son move into dueling positions, Palpatine tells Luke to kill his father and submit himself to the dark side of the Force. Palpatine senses a conflict within Vader, and he knows that Luke would be more powerful of an apprentice than Vader ever could be. Vader stands staring at his son and sees Padme in him. In the back of his head, he hears a voice. It's Qui-Gon's voice. It was the voice of Qui-Gon telling Anakin to meet Obi-Wan Kenobi. Vader's mind races as he remembers his time in the Jedi Order. As clear as day, he sees Master Yoda training him with the other younglings. He sees himself rescuing Obi-Wan from the nest of Gundarks on Bangor, and he envisions the meeting with Padme after 10 years of being away from her. He hears Ahsoka's voice telling him that when she was out alone on the forests near Trendosia, she had nothing but his training and the lessons that she was taught by him. She survived because of Anakin. He remembered his apprentice and the missions they went on, and how much he loved to teach, and then he heard the voice of his old master. A great leap forward often takes 2 steps back, and then coming back into reality, realizing that Luke has knocked his lightsaber out of his hand. The Emperor is cackling as he says, "Do it," to Luke. Just as Anakin had heard all those years ago, Vader realizes that Palpatine was behind all of this, and that Padme, Obi-Wan, and literally everyone that he ever loved and cared for was gone because of the dark side, and because of the Dark Lord of the Sith who used him. He stands defenseless, watching his rage-filled son, and knows that he can't let Sidious take him too. Vader uses the Force to take his lightsaber out of Luke's hand and into his own. More enraged than ever before, Vader charges the Emperor, pulling his own lightsaber to him from across the room. Vader, wielding both blades, slashes at his master, cutting the robes of the Dark Lord. In response, Palpatine laughs and jumps up, unsheathing his own 2 personal lightsabers, and locks blade with Vader. Luke stands back, unsure of what to do, as the Emperor looks into the mask of the man he created, saying that today would be the death of the Skywalker family for good. Sidious uses the Force to throw Vader across the room, and the 2 lightsabers fly from his hands. Luke catches his green blade and faces down the Emperor, giving his father a chance to stand up. In an instant, Sidious's 2 blades clash with Luke's. Red and green illuminate the room as Luke barely fends off each move that Sidious makes. For an old man, he did move with incredible speeds. The Dark Lord continues to egg on the young Jedi, telling him to embrace the hate and anger within. Luke resists this, but does not have the power within him to face down the power of the Emperor alone. While the battle outside rages on, more rebel cruisers are shot down by the Death Star. Sidious continues to strike at Luke. Finally, he lands a hit on young Skywalker, cutting through his mechanical hand. While Luke feels no pain in this, he realizes that he is near defeat, and calls out for help from his father. Vader, who struggles to stand up, uses the Force to push Sidious back, becoming more angry with every passing second. Palpatine cackles and unleashes a torrent of Force lightning towards Luke. Luke, seeing his father's redemption, allows the Force to take control over him. Instead of dodging or reflecting the attack, Luke absorbs the lightning with the Force and unleashes it back onto the Emperor. The Emperor falls back, letting the 2 lightsabers fly from his hands across the throne room floor. Vader approaches his old master, looking at the helpless old man. He remembers walking into the Chancellor's office and seeing Master Windu in the same position that he stood in now, and realizes that he must finish what Mace did not. In one swift strike, Vader's red blade flies down on the Emperor, killing him instantly and freeing Vader from his servitude once and for all. Vader looks back at Luke and smiles beneath the mask. Not that Luke could see it or anything. He walks over to his son and pulls him in for a hug. It was a weird show of affection, but it was the first shown affection towards anyone since he was with Padme on Mustafar. And quite frankly, after 20 plus years, it felt nice. After this brief moment, Vader uses the Emperor's comlink to instruct the Death Star commander to cease fire. He tells the fleet to return to base and contacts the units on Endor, telling them to return to the Death Star immediately. Luke, seeing this, realizes that he needs to contact Lando and tell them that the battle is over. He looks over to his father, who says that he will go and see him soon. Luke smiles and eventually runs down to the hangar bay. Luke finds himself a ship almost immediately, boarding it, and contacts Lando and the rebel forces. He tells them that the Emperor was dead and the battle was won. He leaves out the details surrounding Vader, creating a mystery, knowing that the rebel leadership would be very wary to let the Death Star remain if Vader was alive. The Battle of Endor would conclude, leaving the seat of power in the Empire vacant, and the rebel forces unsure of how to continue. Over the coming months, Vader would take the title of Emperor, later changing it back to Chancellor in the Imperial government. Things would start to change as Vader, for the first time in years, saw the true suffering that the Empire brought to the galaxy. Being a child of slavery, Vader introduced a massive anti-slavery initiative, calling for the abolishment of not only humanoid slavery, but also the slavery of clones and any sentient life in the galaxy. With this, he would change his name back to Anakin Skywalker, shocking the entire galaxy with the revelation that the once Republic hero was actually Darth Vader. Anakin, after months of reforming the Empire, finds himself meeting with Luke regularly, learning about his life, about Owen and Beru, and about the survival of Ahsoka. Eventually, Luke reveals that he has a sister, Leia, and Anakin asks to meet her. When the two meet, Leia is as sassy as always, unsure of how to feel knowing that her father was a Sith Lord. Despite this, Anakin makes a good impression on her, and the two establish the foundations of a bond. He tells his two children about their mother more, and how she always stood up for the common person, how she never fell to corruption or greed, and how she always cared about him, up until the end. The Skywalker family, for the first time in generations, was free from everyone, free from slavery, free from shackles, and united together. Anakin also reunites with some old friends from before the Imperial era, rekindling old friendships, starting with that of Captain Rex. While this would take time for the two of them to build up trust, especially the trust they had in the old days of the Clone Wars, the two of them would warm up to each other, eventually becoming as close as brothers, just as they were. During this time, Anakin also begins to make efforts to heal himself. He sleeps in bacta tanks each night and meditates on the Force every day. While he still requires a respirator to breathe, Anakin finally sheds his black, heavy suit. He, with the help of Rex, constructs a white suit, one that is near exact to the Phase 2 clone armor. His clunky prosthetic limbs are also replaced by a body modder on Coruscant, giving him a lightweight, heavy-duty, multifunctional prosthetics. Anakin, despite having made some reforms, realizes he needs to make full amends with the galaxy, and show the people that the era of terror within the Empire was over. His first move to commence the demilitarization of the Empire. He discontinues the Stormtrooper Corps, and while still keeping some Imperial personnel around for reconstructing, dismisses most of the Imperial Moffs and officers from duty. He decommissions most of the Imperial fleet, but begins a secret project to reconfigure the Death Star into a massive civilian space station, one to give to the Alderaanian people who were not on world when their planet was destroyed. Leia was also given a seat within the Imperial Senate, which was reconstructed, where she would represent the surviving Alderaanians, who reside on all the worlds across the galaxy. With this, members of the Rebellion find themselves to be representatives in the Imperial Senate, including Mon Mothma representing Chandrila, Hera Syndulla representing Ryloth, and Garzib Aurelius representing Lyra San, and Agent Alexander Kallus representing Coruscant, to name a few. Anakin also gives full command of the remaining Imperial personnel to Han Solo, Sabine Wren, and the formerly rebel forces, allowing them to be military leaders of this new era, recognizing that the last few decades of war and suffering were all due to one person in a seat of immense power. Anakin then would step down from the role of Chancellor of the Empire, declaring the role to be unnecessary. He then creates a new role in the Senate, the one titled Mediator. The person here is given no power, and simply exists to help the representatives organize themselves in their votes. The vote for the first Mediator of the Empire results in an overwhelming victory for Mon Mothma, who humbly accepts the role in hopes of rebuilding the galaxy. No longer being in the seat of power, Anakin confides in Luke about the locations of different Jedi temples and libraries across the galaxy. He instructs Luke to let the Force guide him to create a new Jedi Order, or an order of whatever it was that he wanted to create, one that would focus on balance and harmony within the Force. With this, Anakin would leave his children and set off on a journey of his own. Anakin would travel deep into the galaxy, letting the Force guide him on his journey. While he had visited so many worlds in the past, he was finding joy in being able to roam the stars as a free man, revisiting Tatooine, Naboo, Mon Cala, and so many other worlds that he had been to before. Eventually, after weeks of travel, Anakin finds himself on Ilum, the place where he found his first Kyber crystal. While there had been Imperial forces on the planet not even months prior, Anakin landed to find the entire world deserted, with no permanent cities and only a handful of abandoned research stations. Vader set out on a journey to find the old Jedi Temple located somewhere on the world. After hours of walking, he comes across a large cliff face, feeling the Force radiate around him. He sits on the icy grounds and meditates, sensing the mouth of cave behind him on the towering wall of ice. Anakin stands to his feet and uses the Force to lower the cliff face down to the ground, revealing a small opening into a large room. Entering the temple, Anakin is flooded with memories of coming to this place as a child, finding his first kyber crystal, and building his first lightsaber. He remembers Master Yoda instructing his class of younglings here. Anakin paces from pillar to pillar within the temple, admiring an era lost in time, remembering his past. He copies the action of Master Yoda, the one that he used all those decades ago, using the Force to part the stones above, allowing the sunlight to hit the ice on the ceiling, and melt the entrance into the crystal cavern. Anakin enters the cave, unsure if he will actually return. Anakin walks down the hallways, making turns and following routes that he remembers. After a while, after what feels like hours actually, he finds himself lost, running in circles, and finding nothing but ice. Realizing he can't do this alone, he sits down in the hall and meditates, letting the Force guide his mind, and guide him as well. He waits patiently, allowing himself to find clarity within the Force. When Anakin opens his eyes from meditating, he is startled to see Master Yoda sitting next to him. Yes, young Skywalker was no longer young anymore. The old master was speaking to him. Obviously, Anakin didn't understand his power and asked what he was doing here. One with the Force, Yoda had become, and that was all he had to say with a little bit of a chuckle, as he began walking down the path. Anakin would stand up, following the very short ghost of the past, through the never-ending cavern. As Anakin and Yoda walk down the halls, Anakin senses a familiarity with the place. They are going back the way he came, back to the entrance of the cavern. As the two exit the tunnel and reach the light of day streaming through the ceiling of the temple, Anakin freezes. In front of him is Ahsoka, his former Padawan. He knew that she survived, but he is stunned to see her, again, in person. Ahsoka stands and still donning her two lightsabers and robes, and stares at Anakin. He looks at her and whispers that he doesn't understand. That he's excited that she's alive, but he doesn't understand. Anakin runs up to her, but she braces. Last time she saw her master, she was nearly killed by him. Anakin, sensing the fear within her, takes off his helmet, revealing his scarred but healing face and head-spotted hair. He tells Ahsoka that he's back. She looks down and sighs. The Force has led her here, and she knew what she had to do, but she wasn't sure if she was ready to do it. Ahsoka leans down to Master Yoda and smiles, saying hello to the now clearly translucent ghost. Yoda smiles and walks to the center of the temple, motioning for the two to join him, asking for the two of them to listen to him. Yoda sits down and motions for the two to sit side by side, saying that young Ahsoka was no longer so young, chuckling to himself and then even saying for Ahsoka to hold out her lightsabers. Ahsoka follows the former Grand Master's orders, taking off her lightsabers from her belt and holding them out, igniting the two pure white blades. Yes, these blades were purified, and Yoda would admire how these blades had done. As for Master Skywalker, well, their blade and his blade were different. Anakin is taken aback. He hadn't been called Master Skywalker since he was a Jedi, since he killed all the younglings inside of the siege of the Jedi Temple. Yoda asks again to see the lightsaber, and Anakin takes it off of his belt and ignites it, a red blade extending out from the lightsaber hilt. Not purified, not like Ahsoka's. A teacher the Padawan must become, and the student the teacher must become. Yoda would chuckle to himself, standing up and walking away from the two. Ahsoka didn't really understand, and neither did Anakin. Yoda would interrupt their confusion and say that it was time for Ahsoka to teach Anakin the ways of purification. Yoda would smile as he walked back into the cavern and disappear as he entered. Ahsoka, knowing what she must do, closes her eyes in meditation, feeling the immense Force presence in this place. Anakin, unsure of what to do, watches his former apprentice patiently. After an hour, with Ahsoka unmoving, Anakin closes his eyes in meditation, and for the first time in his life, feels a sense of true peace within himself. The Master and former Padawan sit in meditation for hours, unmoving, unspeaking, as they draw upon the Force itself. As night falls, the cold winds of the tundra planet pick up speed. Anakin, distracted by the freezing air, is forced out of his meditation, but after opening his eyes, he does not see Ahsoka. He looks around the temple, frantically looking for her, but she has seemingly vanished. After a little while longer of disturbed meditation, Anakin hears the whir of a ship outside. He stands up and walks out, and he sees Ahsoka in the cockpit of his starship. He exits the Jedi Temple into the icy Rinns, running as fast as his prosthetic legs could carry him. He boards the ship and makes his way to the cockpit, finding Ahsoka there too. He asks where she's taking him, and she tells him that they are going to find a more permanent shelter on the barren world. Anakin tells her that there is an old, abandoned Imperial facility on the other side of the planet. Ahsoka nods, sensing that Anakin feels much shame and regret for allowing the Empire to defile this world, among the many others in the galaxy. The ship soon rises above the temple and takes off, shooting across the sky and towards the only remnants of a civilization. On the other side of the galaxy, the Imperial Senate produces a measure to rename themselves the Galactic Democratic Republic, otherwise known as the GDR, calling for a permanent reform to the way in which they will operate. Soon after, Luke would unveil to the people the completed second Death Star, now outfitted completely for civilian life. The space station, while not nearly large enough or habitable as Alderaan, is given to the remaining Alderaanian people as a place to call home, being able to hold well over 2.5 million people, and with adjustments to have apartments, restaurants, shops, and all the amenities of a 5-star resort. It would be a place of peace for refugees of the Civil War. Alderaanians from all across the galaxy would migrate en masse to the station. Many of these people were Imperial prisoners, arrested during the riots of level 3204 on Coruscant, the Alderaanian level on the Coruscant underworld. They were freed by the Senate after the death of Palpatine, but this was their first real chance of returning to a normal life. Many former Imperial moffs and officers saw this act by Anakin and the Senate as a betrayal of the Emperor and an insult of what used to be the Empire. In response, many of them take up their former holdings across the galaxy, mustering up what stormtrooper power they could find and waging a last-ditch effort to stay in power. These Imperial remnants began to not only fight the Galactic Democratic Republic, but also each other for power. Despite their lack of unity or clear leadership, the factions used acts of terrorism and violence to spark fear and chaos among the people of the galaxy. Around the same time, Han Solo and Senator Leia Organa would be getting married, and they would have their first son, by the name of Ben Solo. Since Leia is such an important member of the Senate, Han retires early from his military command, taking time to bond with his newborn son. He leaves the military command structure in the capable hands of a young Mandalorian woman, Sabine Wren. She was a very capable leader, and being a Mandalorian, was one of the best battle tacticians the Rebel Alliance had, if not even the galaxy had. She would lead the remaining galactic military forces into battle with the Imperial remnants. One former Imperial Admiral, Gallius Rax, was given orders by Palpatine to enact a contingency plan, an order of attacks or events meant to push the galaxy further into failing because of their inability to protect their Emperor. This plan, however, hinged on Imperial military superiority after Sidious' demise, due to the demilitarization of the Imperial Navy and the dismantling of most or all Star Destroyers, superweapons, and military hierarchies. Rax was left with very few resources to complete this contingency plan. Armed with his only Executor-class Star Dreadnought, a handful of TIE fighters and a cargo ship or few, and a skeleton crew of personnel and stormtroopers, Admiral Rax would begin his mission. Being a world outstandingly loyal to the Emperor, Vardos, in the mind of Rax, should be the first planet to be punished. Arriving out of hyperspace in the core region, this small Imperial fleet would begin to rain hellfire down onto the capital city of Kestro. Despite having only one true Star Destroyer, the damage of an aerial bombardment was immense. Thousands of people were killed without any warning, many of them being former Imperial officers, stormtroopers, and personnel that resided on-world. Buildings and cities crumbled as the smoke covered the surface of the planet. The bombardment continued for hours on end, eventually moving from the capital city and targeting smaller cities and settlements across the scattered planet. Vardos, having a small militia that had been formed merely months prior, attempted to launch a counterattack and protect the once loyal system. Yet the few ships that survived the bombardment and made it off-world were not even a match for the small squadron of TIE fighters under the command of Admiral Rax. Word of this attack would spread quickly, reaching the Senate and Coruscant mere minutes after its start. The leaders of the newly formed galactic government would give orders for General Sabine Wren and her forces to send reinforcements to Vardos. While it would take time and several hours for the fleets to prepare for battle and make their way to the core system, Sabine was quick to act. As the GDR forces arrived at a hyperspace, they were horrified to find Vardos in ruins. Even from space, the smoke and ash could be seen covering the planet, invading the atmosphere and covering the once gorgeous red soil on the surface. The fleet had made it out at the last minute, just enough time to stop Rax's fleet from escaping into hyperspace. As the battle commenced, it was obvious that Rax was one of the most skilled battle tacticians the Empire had, but he was no match for the GDR's fleet. With one Star Dreadnought and only a few dozen TIE fighters remaining, Sabine and her forces made a quick work of the ill-equipped contingency fleet. After about an hour of combat, the Star Dreadnought would be destroyed by a team of B-wing bombers, and the remaining Imperial ships are forced to land on the planet that they had just destroyed. At the conclusion of the battle, Sabine and her officers see dozens of escape pods shoot out from the Star Dreadnought into the reaches of space. She orders the fleet to locate and capture the pods, and whoever is inside of them. They might need them for interrogation in the future. As for herself, she collects a small fleet of her best units and descends to the surface of Vardos. She wants to capture the rest of Rax's forces alive, if possible. As the GDR forces land on the planet, they are all appalled. People, citizens of the GDR, lie dead in the streets. Thousands of them. Blood is pulled up alongside a roadside, and once towering skyscrapers were reduced to nothing but ash. Sabine is heartbroken. She was never attached to the planet, but she remembers a short outing her class at the Imperial Academy took to this place. She remembers the glimmering red soil and unending mountain ranges, and the clear oceans. She recalls meeting different beings of all different races. Sure, they were united in their support of the Empire, but they were kind to her and they made her feel at home when she was there. Tears would well up inside of Sabine's eyes and fall down her face as she puts her helmet on, trying to conceal her pain from the troops around her. Sabine orders her forces to spread out and search for any Imperial survivors. She tells them that right now, the mission that was important was finding anyone that survived the bombardment and anyone that escaped the Executor. Luke and the new Jedi Order would be here soon to give aid to the people of Vardos. Their only job was to stop Imperial efforts once and for all. The GDR forces scour the cities and wilderness in search of any remaining Imperial craft, but instead find riots among the surviving locals. The Imperial ships that managed to land were immediately boarded by the citizens of Vardos. These people wanted revenge, and they had nothing to lose. Each ship the Galactic Democratic Republic forces found would be littered with the bodies of the unfortunate Imperial personnel that escaped, and the ships themselves were found to be damaged beyond repair. With no Imperial survivors, Sabine would leave the planet, leaving behind a small group of soldiers and medics to help Luke and the Jedi give aid to the ruined civilization. Back on Ilum, Ahsoka and Anakin made their way to an abandoned Imperial research station. Inside, they find that most of the things had been taken or destroyed by the Empire before the evacuation of the base. Despite this, the two were able to restore power to the station with relative ease, and even more relieving was the food that the Empire had left behind. While Ahsoka would continue to scavenge the base looking for anything else of use, she would tell Anakin to rest. The next few days would be trying for him, and he would need his rest and his strength to complete the training. Anakin finds ways to sleeping quarters within the station, and despite having no pillows or blankets, is able to fall asleep in comfort and peace. The next day, Anakin awakes in a daze. He looks outside and sees nothing but darkness. Anakin jumps out of bed and runs out of the room. He searches the compound, eventually finding Ahsoka in one of the empty rooms, meditating. As he enters, she opens her eyes. Anakin apologizes. He thought he slept all day. And Ahsoka asks if Anakin does remember the time that he was here as a youngling, and the fact that the rotation on Ilum was the equivalent to 17 days. Anakin would sigh in a bit of relief and ask how long he was out for, to which Ahsoka would reply that it didn't really even matter, now that it was time for training especially. She motions for him to join her on the floor, and so he does. Anakin, though, is uncomfortable. Despite finding inner peace and balance over the last few months, his ego continues to invade his thoughts, and he doesn't much like the idea of being trained by his former apprentice. Ahsoka can sense the lack of humility in her former master, but she leaves it be. Only a few years ago she was dueling him to the death on Malachor. Now, she was training him to purify himself and his Force essence. She was just as uncomfortable as he was. To bleed a kyber crystal is to subject to fear and anger and hatred within you. Doing so is to mold your crystal to your will, not to the will of the Force. This is something that Anakin truly understood, and Ahsoka would repeat it to him. She would hold out her hand, understanding that if Anakin gave her her lightsaber, she would ignite it, casting a red glow over the room. The kyber crystal that Anakin had was bent to his regret and to his suffering. He broke the will of the kyber crystal and the will of the Force. Ahsoka would sheathe the lightsaber and set it on the floor in front of her. She begins taking her saber apart, unscrewing the base of the hilt and removing the power emitter. She delicately uses the Force to lift Anakin's dark red kyber crystal out of the casing, and it gives off a deep crimson glow, emanating the dark Force around it. Anakin looks down. There's a lot of regret within him. He feels it haunting his past and his current self. Ahsoka senses this and uses the Force to push the kyber crystal away from them, laying it on the floor across the room. She tells him that the crystal not only was bent to the Force essence, but it was also emanating the sense of who he used to be. Anakin would ask what he could do to fix this, and Ahsoka would smile for the first time since reuniting with Anakin. She can sense that he's in a lot of pain, but for right reasons. His regret, while dark, is now a burden upon him, rather than a fuel within him. One can purify a blood kyber crystal, but purifying them and the Force essence is a long journey that needs to be taken with patience and generosity. Ahsoka would unhook her two lightsabers and ignite the two of them, the white light bouncing off the walls and filling the room. She would tell him to meditate on himself, on his past, on his future, on everything that surrounds him, telling him that with time the crystal that Anakin had would be balanced and purified. She knew this because she did it herself. Ahsoka would stand up and leave the room, closing the door behind her. Anakin would sigh and close his eyes in meditation. After a few hours of blank meditation, Anakin finally hears something. A woman gasping for air. He hears Padme's voice say that Obi-Wan knew there was good in him, and with his eyes closed in meditation, a tear falls down Anakin's cheek. This is the moment he never wanted to relive, the moment he never hoped to see. He hears the sounds of crying children and realizes that this is Luke and Leia's birth. Wanting to open his eyes and stop the meditation, Anakin cries out through the Force, not wanting to relive his past, yet knowing that this is the only way to find balance and purification within himself. He continues on. For hours, Anakin sits eyes closed, reliving his darkest moments. After the death of Padme, Anakin sees his mother die in his arms. He watches himself slaughter the Tusken Raiders mercilessly. He watches himself kill mothers and children, just as they did to him. Anakin watches himself take his pain and anger out on Padme, and though he feels regret, he comes to terms with the way he treated her and the idea that he was so far gone so early into his life. Anakin sees himself force choke for the first time while interrogating Poggle the Lesser. He winces as he sees anger in his own face. Then again, he watches himself as he force chokes Queen Marsh Sintel of Zygeria, knowing where he's going next. Anakin tries to pull himself out of the meditation as he opens his eyes or tries to stand up, but the Force has a control on him, and he can't do it. Anakin's neck tenses and his face goes pale as Ahsoka walks into the room. She knows exactly what her former master is going through, and while it is necessary, she does feel pity for him. Before him, Anakin watches as he sees Padme walking back to his former self. This scene is played out in his head every day for the last 25 years, but this time, it was his most painful memory. He watches as he tells Padme about ruling the galaxy together, and he watches her realize that his former self had been turned into Vader. He sees his past self see Obi-Wan standing on Padme's ship, and he watches as a newly turned Vader holds out his hand. Anakin screams no as Vader force chokes Padme, and he watches her fall down, unconscious, onto the landing platform, as Vader is confronted by his former master, Obi-Wan Kenobi. Ahsoka puts her hand on Anakin, feeling his body go cold. She watches his kyber crystal flicker in the moment. Ahsoka stands over him, using the Force to comfort him and calm his Force essence. Despite only hours going by, it felt like a lifetime for Anakin, as he relives the moments for which he hated himself the most for. On Coruscant, General Sabine Wren would return from the Battle of Vardos, with a few dozen stormtroopers and remnant officers in custody, including Admiral Rax himself. On World, these prisoners are tried and convicted of treason against the GDR. Despite the death and destruction caused by the Imperial attack, the reformed GDR Senate led by Leia, Mon Mothma, and Hera Syndulla is a lot more merciful of a Senate. They would vote to give the lower-class troopers and officers sentences of only a decade or two. However, many members of the Senate call for the higher-ranking officers to be made an example of. After a divisive vote, which most of the upper-level leadership of this Imperial remnant, what remains of it, is sentenced to death for their atrocities on Vardos. Admiral Rax, notorious for always covering his own behind, begs for a plea deal. He tells the Imperial Senate that he has information on the continued whereabouts of Emperor Palpatine, that he is still alive, operating in the unknown regions, building himself back to power. Many senators believe this to be a lie, just a way for Rax to lead them in circles long enough for him to escape. Yet, Mon Mothma, as mediator, calls for a vote. She proposes that the Senate should approve if Rax should be able to share his information with the representatives here and now. If within a year this information comes true, he'd be given a merciful and reduced sentence. If not, the original verdict would stand and he would be convicted to death. While the senators wanted to see Admiral Rax killed for his actions, the vote narrowly passes. Many of the senators who vote yes do so to ensure the longevity and the safety of the Galactic Democratic Republic, but several others do so as loyalists, still hoping for the return of the Empire. A divided Senate, of course. As Rax is now allowed to speak, he stands in front of a hall of thousands of representatives. He tells them that Palpatine, in his final days, confided him in a contingency plan. The beginning of this plan entailed bombarding and destroying loyalist planets as punishment for failing to protect the Emperor, the first being Vardos. The original idea was Operation Cinder, though if Vader hadn't turned against the Empire, Operation Cinder would have been in full effect. With this, he was tasked with killing disloyal or unfit Imperial officers, only keeping the most loyal and talented of them, for the rebuilding of the Empire. He tells them that the other factions of Imperial remnants are rogue, uncontrolled by him, and uniformed by the contingency plan. After the attacks, the Imperial remnant fleets were going to flee into the unknown regions and begin colonization efforts on what worlds they could find. Senator Aurelius, though, pointed out that the Admiral was only pointing out the future plans of the Imperial remnant, had they survived the Battle of Vardos. The rest of the Senate buzzes with agreement before Rax can interject, trying to get them to wait because there was important details that he was just getting to. He shouts in a plea for his life to try and get the Senate's attention. He tells the Senate that Palpatine, being a Sith Lord, discovered a way to transfer his Force essence and his consciousness from his body into the body of another, a subjugated, much weaker person. He tells them that Palpatine for the last 2 decades had been sending out drones and scouts into the unknown regions in an attempt to find safe hyperspace routes to and from the ancient Sith world of Exegol. Once they had found it, the Emperor had begun a cloning initiative in hopes that he would be able to transfer his consciousness and essence into clones of himself, rather than another willing or weaker individual. Rax informs the Senate before his death, Sidious made great strides in effort. He feared that the time may come when Palpatine would return, and he too may be punished for his failures. Having this information, the Senate votes that Rax is useful, for now. However, with Luke being one of the most powerful Jedi in the galaxy, they decide to wait to send a mission to Exegol in hopes that Anakin would return to help him. Before dismissing Rax and sending him to the prison with his fellow Imperial Senator Leia Organa Skywalker speaks up. She asks if there's anything else that they should know about the contingency plan or even the Imperial Remnant. Rex stands in silence in front of the Senate, conflicted. He tells them that there was one last piece to the contingency plan on Jakku. Rex tells them that over the years, Palpatine constructed an observatory on the planet of Jakku in the far reaches of the Inner Rim. This observatory, more so a warehouse, stockpiled with thousands of Sith relics. At the center of this observatory, Palpatine used droids to construct a borehole leading to the planet's core. Rex, as part of the plan, was to dump the Sith relics into the hole, triggering a cataclysm of the planet, destroying both it and everything in its orbit. The Senate stirs with gasps and shouts, many senators calling for Admiral Rex to be put to death immediately for such crimes, but the votes had already been cast. Mon Mothma thanks Admiral Rex and dismisses him to the prison guards waiting to take him away. At the research base on Ilum, Anakin and Ahsoka have no idea of their proximity to Exegol and the Emperor's cloning base, nor that they knew of its existence. Completely isolated from the rest of the galaxy, Anakin and Ahsoka meditate on the Force day in and day out. While Anakin continues to make progress, he clings onto the past, ashamed of his former self. He confides in Ahsoka, telling her that now he realizes that he cannot use the Force to act in times of pain or anger, and knows that he must find peace through the Force in these moments. He swears off Force choking, and while he isn't even sure that his new lightweight limbs could even handle Force lightning, he vows to never use it either. Ahsoka tells him that with these same powers, often have light side counterparts, much like electric judgment. She recalls the tale of when she was his apprentice, and force-choked a Trandoshan when she was taken captive by the Hunters, and used her as prey to hunt. These powers were not inherently bad, it was the motive or the mindset that you used the power to use. She explained to her former master, and Anakin would shake his head, telling her that he wouldn't let himself get that close to darkness, never again. Ahsoka would solemnly nod, respecting Anakin's diligence in keeping himself accountable for his actions. Over the next couple months, Anakin would continue to grapple with his past, running memories through his head and bringing into question his entire existence. Ahsoka would stay by his side most of the time, only going off on her own to meditate or travel to one of the few local systems to buy food or supplies from the locals. Anakin and Ahsoka over these months would form a bond unlike their former friendship, where Anakin saw her as a student and somewhat like a sister. Instead, Anakin would develop a deep-seated respect for her. Over the decades, she became powerful, wise, and balanced. She was still fun-loving and daring, just as she had been all those years ago, but in a different way. Anakin found himself appreciating her more and more each day, both as a teacher and a newfound friend. After a year passed on Ilum, Anakin had changed, both physically and mentally. While his face and body still had deep scarring all over it, his skin started to heal, and he began to look more like his old self, the one Ahsoka remembered. His hair grew patchy and slow, but eventually grew out enough to reach his shoulders, despite not sleeping in Bacta each night, as he was after the Battle of Endor. Anakin needed his respirator less and less often, eventually moving it from his suit entirely. He also got used to his new arms and legs, so much so that Ahsoka often found him wandering the research base alone at night without his armor on. She was very proud of him. Despite everything he did over the last 20 years, she always knew that there was good in him. During meditation sessions, Ahsoka would watch her former master, as he was brought through his memories and forced to come to terms with his regrets, pain, suffering, and choices. She would see the Kyber crystal on the floor in the same place she sat it nearly a year ago. Sometimes it would glow red, and others it would flicker. One time, Ahsoka even thought she saw it turn purple or white for a moment. She didn't tell Anakin about this. She knew that he had to be motivated to finish this process, not by success, but by the will of himself to be better for himself and to find balance within the Force itself. Not long after this, when Ahsoka was away on a supply run, Anakin would begin meditating, just as he had done every day for the past year. Just like before, his old memories would come pouring into his mind, but this time they are different. He sees Padme and Mustafar, but instead of seeing his own actions, he smiles. He watches her, observing her beauty, and realizes how lucky he was to have her in his life, even for just the short period of time that he did. Anakin sees his mother dying in his arms. He watches her, remembering how much she used to do to keep him happy, safe, fed, and cared for. He misses her, but he knows that she was the best mother a little boy could ever ask for. He sees Obi-Wan, hearing his master tell him that it was over, apologizing for failing him. Instead of seeing the betrayal in himself, he recalls all the old memories and teachings and journeys he had with Obi-Wan Kenobi. Anakin awakens from his meditation to a voice that says that Anakin had finally embraced the balance within him, saying that Ahsoka had taught him well. Anakin's eyes would dart across the room, finding the forced ghost of Obi-Wan Kenobi standing in the doorway. Anakin would jump up and run to his former master, apologizing for everything. Obi-Wan would just smile and tell him that Padme knew this day would come. Anakin would smile as a tear shed down his face as he looks into the eyes of his former master, and he thought he lost him. Obi-Wan glances across the room. Anakin follows his eyes down to the kyber crystal laying on the floor. Anakin had noticed earlier, or maybe he was too distracted by seeing Obi-Wan, but the crystal had been filling the room with bright, pure white light. The crystal itself no longer blood red, but a rather deep and purified white. Anakin would run over, picking up the crystal, feeling it in his hand. It isn't like the first kyber crystal. It isn't calling to him, and it doesn't feel delicate or fragile. It also doesn't feel like the crystal he bled. It isn't heavy or painful, and its edges aren't sharp or rough. The crystal, it feels lightless. It feels weightless, almost as if he wasn't holding anything at all. And yet Anakin knows that he could drop it, or even throw it, and it wouldn't break. The force surrounding it emanates balance, bringing peace to Anakin and filling the room with a sense of calmness. It feels like his entire universe is gone still, and all things, good and evil, are gone, only leaving the silence of nothingness. Anakin can't take his eyes off of it, frozen in the moment. Anakin is drawn to meditate on the crystal, forgetting entirely that the ghost of his master was around him. He holds the crystal, feeling its purity surrounding him, pulling his mind to the force. Hours pass, and then days, and eventually, Ahsoka returns from her supply run. She arrives to see Anakin's eyes closed, crystal in hand. She smiles, saying that the pure white stone is in his hand and that he finally purified it. She remembers when she first purified hers and how it felt, the silence and balance that filled her on her journey, and through the Force in doing so. Ahsoka unpacks her ship before sitting down next to Anakin. She closes her eyes and begins to meditate alongside of him. After several hours pass and the sun rises and falls on the Tundra planet, Ahsoka opens her eyes to find that Anakin still had his eyes closed. Concerned, she taps her former master on the shoulder, asking and calling out his name to make sure he was okay. She did continue to raise her voice to say his name, but he didn't even flinch. Minutes pass, and worried, she began to shake him, to no avail. Finally, she had an idea. She reached down and tried prying his fingers open, trying to take the kyber crystal from his hand. Almost immediately, Anakin comes from his meditation and falls back to the floor. Ahsoka asks how long Anakin had been in there, and Anakin kind of confusedly says that since Obi-Wan was here. And Ahsoka was like, what? Obi-Wan? Was he really here? And Anakin nods because he was in his mind, explaining to her that the day after she left, the Force spirit of Obi-Wan visited him, much like Yoda did in the previous year. Anakin's eyes widen as he realizes that he had been in meditation for 2 weeks, because Ahsoka had been gone for 2 weeks. Ahsoka helps Anakin off the floor and helps him into the other room, which the two had made into a makeshift mess hall of sorts. She sits him down before going through the bags of food supplies she brought back, finding him something to eat and something to drink. Ahsoka tells Anakin that she remembers when she purified her crystals. It was a little while that she was in meditation, but not that long. Putting a pot of water over a makeshift electric heater, Anakin nods, exhausted, but smiling. He finally did it. It had been over a year, but he had purified himself in the crystal, letting go of his past and finally finding true balance in his mind and in his heart. Ahsoka says that she thinks it's time for Anakin to decide to create his own new lightsaber. Anakin nods, thanking her for the help in all of this. The next day, Anakin tells Ahsoka that he wants to construct the lightsaber in honor of Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon Jinn. He explains that he had a vision, while he was meditating, of himself wielding a lightsaber, teaching future Jedi younglings with Luke. This lightsaber was similar to Master Jinn's, with a black, corrugated handle with a sleek, narrow blade emitter, like Obi-Wan's had. Ahsoka smiles as she walks out of the room, saying nothing. A moment later, she returns with a bag, and inside of it, there were parts for different lightsabers, hilts, emitters, modulation circuits, energy gates, and more. Everything he would ever need to build his new lightsaber was right here in this bag. Over the next coming days, Anakin spent day and night using the Force to maneuver the parts together. It took him longer than expected, but he eventually was able to put piece by piece together and where it needed to be, ensuring that he didn't invert the emitter matrix, of course. His mission finally being complete, Anakin expresses to Ahsoka that he wants to return to Coruscant to find Luke and Leia. He truly missed his children. Ahsoka, not having been to Coruscant since the fall of the Republic, agrees to accompany him. On their journey back, Anakin is able to contact with his daughter, and he tells her that he is returning home, now with Ahsoka. Leia, having only heard stories about the former Jedi, smiles gently. Suddenly, another younger woman appears in the holoprojector. Coming from the comlink, Sabine Wren is smiling ear to ear, so happy to see Ahsoka, really surprised that she's here to see her. Anakin smiles and turns to Ahsoka, not realizing that she had made friends, making a snarky comment about it. Anakin turns the holoprojector scanner towards Ahsoka, and Sabine and her reunite, talking about everything that had happened since their last interaction: the Battle of Vardos, her new rank in the Galactic Democratic Republic Navy, and most importantly, that Leia just offered her a seat in the Senate to represent the unification efforts of Mandalore. Ahsoka smiles, telling Sabine that she's very proud, and she might have to take her for a special mission once they get to Coruscant. Sabine's smile turns to confusion as she asks Ahsoka what would be more important than all of this. Ahsoka, knowing Sabine will join her, says that she thinks that she knows where Ezra would be, and that they needed to find him. Sabine's mouth would drop open as she stands stunned in silence. She agrees to this, and while on the comlink, she tells Leia that she would like to do this. Leia would know that she needed to talk and find her friend. Before cutting off the communication, Leia tells her father that Luke had moved to Deveron to rebuild the Jedi Temple and the Jedi Order. With this, she tells Anakin of their newborn son, Ben Solo, named after Ben Kenobi. Anakin is very emotional about this, realizing not only that he does have a grandson, but that Obi-Wan had a very important impact on the lives of both of his children. As Anakin and Ahsoka come out of hyperspace eventually and arrive at Coruscant, Sabine, Zeb, Leia, Han, and baby Ben Solo are all waiting for them and welcoming them home. Anakin humbly shows his daughter his new lightsaber, and she responds by telling him that she is proud of him for accomplishing this feat. While she hadn't been trained in the Force, she could feel the peace and balance radiating from her father. As quickly as the duo arrive, though, Ahsoka pulls Sabine and Zeb aside. She tells them that she has a lead on Ezra and Thrawn, and that they have to act quickly. Sabine agrees to go, but Zeb tells her that he has to stay. He is involved in an effort to find more Lasat refugees and bring them to Lirasan. Ahsoka nods in understanding before taking Sabine away to plan for their journey. Anakin, on the other hand, is rushed to the Senate building. He is informed of all the details of the Battle of Vardos and the Emperor's contingency plan. When asked about whether or not he knew of these details, Anakin tells him that he did not. He explains that Sidious never truly trusted him, and that his former master would have never allowed him to know such things. While the Senate is divided in their trust for Anakin, they agree to send him, as well as Luke and the recently emerged Cal Kestis, to Exegol. They were instructed to find Palpatine, destroy the cloning facilities he made, and ensure the safety and stability of the GDR. Anakin would agree, before the Force tug at him to finish what he started and bring true balance to the galaxy. Within days, Anakin says goodbye to his daughter once more and makes his way to the landing bay of an old Jedi temple. While he wanted to find Ahsoka and thank her one last time, Leia told him that her Sabine had already left the planet en route to the ancient system of Zakul. Arriving at the old Jedi Temple, Anakin sees a massive construction zone covered that was once the home of the Jedi. The GDR was tearing down the palace that Sidious built for himself inside of it. Anakin was very happy that they were doing this, understanding that this was truly the end of an era, as he entered the temple. As he walks in, he sees nothing but ruins and demolishment. Very few rooms were still intact, or even standing. That is, except for the landing platform. Anakin had been told by Mon Mothma that the building was being torn down and replaced by a shelter for the refugees of the war, a home for the homeless. a place of aid and security. The landing bay, therefore, would remain intact, ensuring unimpeded supply drops and civilian transport. Anakin would smile as he walked out, seeing the dozens of ships that would be going towards this effort. Anakin looks for the ship designated to him by the Senate. After looking around for a moment, he hears a beep, then a whistle. Anakin runs to the ship to find R2-D2 standing next to a small freighter, shaking with joy. Anakin missed R2, and R2 obviously missed Anakin. It's been a while, and R2 would whistle at Anakin. Anakin realized that though through all these years, R2's memory banks had never been wiped. Anakin smiled at his old friend, ushering the droid to board the ship and come join him on one last mission. On Devron, Luke and Cal have, with the help of droids, rebuilt the majority of the ancient Jedi Temple and Edict. Cal, who has recently emerged from the shadows of the galaxy, was overjoyed to find Luke, and had been training in the Force with the young Skywalker ever since. While there were no younglings or even Padawans in the world just yet, the two Jedi were keen on building a new order, one with a different code than the one that Anakin belonged to. This new order would encourage passion, attachment, families, and emotion, as these, to Luke, were some of the core reasons he succeeded during the time of the rebellion. With this, Anakin had told Luke of the High Council, of their methods of recruiting infants, somewhat forcibly, and the weaker among the Jedi younglings and Padawans being forced to work in the service corps instead of being trained more fully in the ways of the Force. All these would be attributes of the Jedi of the past. Luke sought to create an order based on balance, harmony, and bringing aid to the galaxy. And when Anakin arrived on Devron, he was absolutely stunned at the magnificence of this reconstructed and renovated Jedi Temple. He recalled a few times he visited the place with Obi-Wan, but it had always been desolate and it felt so ancient to him. As he landed, or more so R2 landed the ship, Anakin was met by a familiar face, that of his son, as well as a vaguely familiar one. Cal would introduce himself, telling Anakin that they had met before, in the Jedi temples during the Clone Wars. He was apprenticed to Jaro Tapal. Cal looked starstruck, and Anakin recalls the way he was perceived back then. He was the hero of the Republic, and though he didn't like to admit it back then, he knew the younglings looked up to him. Cal looked to Luke, and then back to Anakin, seeing the resemblance between father and son, mind still racing, processing the fact that his childhood hero was the father of his newfound friend and partner. Luke had not told Cal yet of Anakin's past as Darth Vader, as he wanted to ensure mental clarity and peace within the new friend. Cal and Vader had met on a few occasions, but Cal did not recognize the man before him, in the same way Anakin did not recognize Cal. His time hunting Jedi was nearly 2 decades long, and after a few years of all those he met, dueled, and or killed, they were all lost to his memory. Anakin tells the two young men they had done a wonderful job in restoring this temple, and if they would allow him, he would cherish the opportunity to serve under them and help rebuild the Order, the one that he destroyed all those years ago. Luke and Cal would enthusiastically accept the offer before giving Anakin a full tour of the new home of the Jedi within the temple. There was a garden, similar to the one on the temple in Coruscant, as well as endless living quarters, training spaces, etc. There was even a library, with the recovered texts of the Jedi that Jocasta knew would have been impressed by, because she saved them after all. After this, Anakin tells the two that he would like to go on one last mission with them before they start this new journey in constructing a Jedi temple. He tells them of the Emperor's contingency plan, explaining that they must move quickly in order to ensure the safety of the GDR. The two agree to accompany Anakin, agreeing that they must defeat the Sith one last time. Before they depart, though, Anakin asks Cal to spar with him. He had fought his own son on several occasions, and he knew his skill with a lightsaber was more than excellent. He doesn't, however, know the power of this newfound Jedi. Cal agrees, and the two Jedi enter one of the training rooms. As they both ignite their lightsabers, purple and white filling the room, Cal's mouth drops open. Although Luke's skill and power in the Force was outmatched, Cal was alive during the Clone Wars and was taught at the Jedi Temple. He remembers learning about the ancient Jedi who purified kyber crystals of defeated Sith, turning them white and pure, and he was shocked to see that Anakin had done this. Anakin asked if Cal was ready, moving into a dueling position. Cal was ready as ever. Anakin and Cal moved towards one another, locking blades for a moment before pushing each other away. Anakin would go easy on him. All he needs to know is that Cal has what it takes to help him defeat Palpatine. Cal jumps up and grabs a raptor beam above, kicking Anakin's lightsaber out of his hand. He smirks and jumps back down, slashing at Anakin with his blade. Anakin easily dodging attacks though, and using his mechanical legs to propel him, jumping over to his lightsaber. The two parry, slash, and block each other's strikes. Cal presses a button on his hilt, and another blade erupts from the end of it. Anakin is taken aback. It had been a long time since he met a Jedi who could wield a double-bladed lightsaber, much less effective with one. As the two continue to duel, Anakin goes a little harder on Cal, forcing him to resort to some force abilities to move both himself and his lightsaber to stay on par with the Chosen One. After a bit of this, Cal, smirking, snaps his lightsaber in two, now wielding both ends of the individual lightsabers. Anakin is again stunned. He had never seen such an interesting lightsaber design and choices, especially not since Asajj Ventress. The two continued dueling for a longer moment, and both to his surprise and expectation, Anakin's assumptions are confirmed. Cal is not bound, or master, of any single kind of form. Instead, he fights with a mix of 1, 2, and 4, as well as a minimal Jakari, although he is nowhere near as talented as Ahsoka with two blades. The sparring session ends with Anakin telling Cal that he's impressed, and that Master Tapal taught him well. Cal smiles ear to ear, overjoyed with being able to impress this legend of a man. Anakin senses this within him, without letting it give him power or either fill his ego, moves to the mission at stake. As the three Jedi depart from Devron, Cal and Luke ask Anakin how they are supposed to find, much less get, to Exegol. There are no hyperspace routes that lead there, and its location has been a mystery for millennia. Anakin smiles, telling R2 to navigate them to Ilum. It wouldn't be far from there. On the journey to Ilum, Anakin explains to the two young men that back in the days of the Old Republic, Jedi used to navigate the hyperspace lanes using the Force. While this was often an ability found only in a few Jedi, with a powerful connection to the Force, they would be able to do it, just that, when the time would come. While Luke and Cal were hesitant, knowing the risks of making the wrong move in hyperspace, Anakin's confidence gave them hope, and this ability that this might work. Upon arrival to the Ilum system, Anakin tells R2 to pull them out of hyperspace, and to take the Nava computers to manual. R2, with a little worried whistle, complies, as Anakin asks Cal and Luke if they are ready. With near panic in both of their chests, they both answer with a stunning yes. And Anakin tells R2 to put them back in hyperspace. With Anakin now in control of the Navi computers, he rapidly taps the buttons and, with his connection to the Force, navigates the first few moments perfectly. Suddenly, Cal gets a feeling in his gut. He knows that Anakin made a wrong move, or pushed a wrong button or something. Hesitant, but wanting to save their lives, Cal jumps in front of Anakin and uses the Force to sense what needs to be corrected. Moments later, the ship is auto-pulled out of hyperspace in front of a massive blue planet. "That's it," says Anakin. R2 lands the ship as the three Jedi depart in search of the Sith temple on the planet. Anakin has been here once before, as Vader, and he knew the general area in which to find it. However, he was focused more on reaching out for the Force, searching out the essence of his former master. Before long, the three hear the sounds of clanking and rumbling beneath them. Luke and Cal feel a cold, dark presence here. Luke recalled the same feeling when he first met the Emperor, but this was worse, colder, and much, much darker. Anakin, meanwhile, only felt the presence of his weakened master, finding peace in this discovery. The three men traversed to a nearby opening, the opening of a Sith temple beneath the ground. As they enter, a wave of fear and horror engulfs the two younger Jedi. Anakin, though, uses his balance in the Force to calm their minds and their hearts, confirming to them that they have the ability to see through this. They descend further and further into the temple as noises of machinery and clanking get louder and louder. Soon Anakin, Luke, and Cal find themselves at the entrance to a large room, one filled with thousands of ship parts, conveyor belts, and droids. Anakin recognizes this. This is a factory that Sidious had set up in decades prior, one to create an army of Star Destroyers. Still, Anakin remains calm and confident, believing in their power to bring peace and balance to the galaxy. As the Jedi continue on, they eventually find themselves in a large room of Bacta, with all clones inside of them. Surrounding the area lie dozens of statues, most of them Sith Lords, whose stories by this point had been lost to time. In the center of the room, connected to tubes and back to patches, is a man that Anakin had killed less than 2 years prior. With him stood a handful of men in dark robes, the Sith Eternal Cultists. These men, who were not overly strong on the dark side, lived and died to serve the Sith, generation after generation. Luke, Cal, and Anakin, seeing this, each pull out their lightsabers, igniting them. Sidious's eyes, who were glowing deep in yellow, told the cultists to kill them, and despite their best efforts, the Sith Eternal were not armed with much more than a staff or a standard blaster, and they were all cut down by the Jedi with simple ease. Anakin could sense the fear growing in his old master, who leaped to his feet as the tubes tearing out of him did as he moved. Palpatine, or rather the clone that Palpatine was inhabiting, reaches his arms out with the Force and pushes the three. Luke and Cal fall backwards, but Anakin stands still, the Force resonating from him. Anakin, in one swift motion, leaps to Palpatine and, with his purified lightsaber, cuts him down. The Emperor, dead, falls to the floor, as more Sith Eternal Cultists appear from the depths of the temple. Luke and Cal stand up once again, joining Anakin, as they defend themselves against the group of Sith fanatics. Quickly and easily, the Jedi stand alone in a room. Anakin tells them that they must end this, now, for good. The three men go to each of the Bacta tanks and cut it open, releasing the clones inside and killing them. They each then make their way to the cloning records that Sidious kept, wiping them completely before destroying the systems. Anakin, now realizing that at this rate, and with this much darkness within the Force surrounding Luke and Cal, they would never be able to dismantle all of the ships, factory floors, and cloning systems with enough time to save themselves. Anakin uses his comlink to call R2, who quickly chirps in response. He tells the droid to follow the signal that he's sending out, and bring as many detonators as he can with him. R2 beeps in confirmation, and Anakin sends out their location to R2. Within minutes, R2 is using his thrusters to fly through the temple, seemingly having a great time enjoying the ride through the ancient Sith ruins. As the droid approaches Anakin, Luke, and Cal, Anakin chuckles. R2 would never change. Why would he? Hooked to R2 were several bags, all filled to the brim with detonators. Anakin came prepared, as he knew something like this may have to happen. The three Jedi and one droid divide up the explosives before running/flying through the temple. They place the devices on support beams, machinery, fuel tanks, and anything they sense may be important to Sidious if he were to rebuild his empire. Soon the entire temple is filled with the blink, blink, blink of flashing red lights, and the Jedi move to an escape. They exit the temple quickly, Luke and Cal feeling the burden that the dark side carries, and reach the surface. R2 had ever so kindly parked the ship almost directly in front of the entrance to the temple, and the crew all board the ship as they take off. Anakin tells R2 to hover the ship for a moment. He looks down at the detonator in his hand, knowing that this final action would bring balance to the galaxy forever, as he presses the button. In an instant, the Sith temple goes up in a massive explosion, and then falls down onto itself, creating a massive hole where the Sith once past ruled. All three Jedi and every single Jedi/Force user across the galaxy would feel the weight off of their minds and chests as the root of evil is finally purged from the galaxy. Over the coming years, Anakin would become the lead combatant instructor within the new Jedi Order, instructing the classes of younglings in the ways of lightsaber forms. Well, except for Jakar. That was up to Ahsoka. Luke and Cal would run the new Jedi Order as they initially intended, allowing and encouraging attachments, friendship, and balance of emotions and rationality. Ahsoka would eventually return with Sabine and their old friend Ezra, who had grown immensely over the years, now towering above Zeb and sporting a beard that could rival Obi-Wan Kenobi's. Sabine would finally accept her role as the representative of Mandalore in the Senate, and Ahsoka and Ezra would make their way to Devron, joining the new Jedi Order, and teaching the younger generations the ways of the Force. Leia, when not held up in her Senate duties, she would often visit Devron with Han. Leia would begin to learn the ways of the Force, and once Ben was identified as being Force-sensitive, the entire Solo family would relocate to the Jedi Temple. Leia, while never creating a lightsaber of her own, would be so ecstatic when Luke and Anakin returned from their trip to Ilum with Ben, who had just made his first lightsaber. Han, unlike everyone else on Devron, not being even slightly Force-sensitive, would leave the world to take jobs running cargo and being an advisor to the GDR. However, when Leia was revealed to be pregnant once again, Han would return to the temple, helping Leia through pregnancy. When she gave birth to 2 twins, Jana and Jason, Han decided it was time to stay on world, for good. While he was often bored with the children being trained, raised, and cared for by their uncle and grandfather, he found ways to fill his time, exploring the jungle world, visiting research and trade outposts that were not abandoned by the former Empire. Eventually, Han, becoming increasingly bored, would take up an interest in the ways of the ancient religion of the Jedi, having not much better to do, delving himself into reading and studying the texts of the extensive library within the temple. Han would go from a somewhat skeptic to a firm admirer and almost an advisor of the ancient religion. After years of intense study, Han was given the position of becoming the first Jedi archivist of the new Jedi Order, allowing him to teach the scripts, history, and legacy of the Jedi Order of the past. Ben Solo, having his father, uncle, and grandfather to lead him, would never see a reason to leave the Order or turn to the dark side. He would rise to become one of the Order's best Jedi of his time. He would lead his twin siblings into becoming powerful Jedi as well, even taking the sole responsibility of bringing them to Ilum to find their first lightsaber crystals. After many years, the Jedi would regain their notoriety in the galaxy as peacekeepers and selfless vessels of aid. As a few more decades would pass, Anakin would leave the Order, retiring to his home planet of Tatooine. As an aging man, he felt the Force pulling him to return home. When he arrived, he was greeted by none other than the aging Boba Fett. Anakin, shocked, asked what Boba was doing here, to which he responded that he was the daimyo of Mos Espa and the Dune Sea. Thinking Boba was just now the head of a criminal empire, Anakin would step back, only to be stopped by Fett. He explained that after the death of Jabba and his own survival of the Sarlacc pit, he was given aid by the Tusken Raiders, and eventually took over as daimyo. However, he only sought to help the people of Mos Espa thrive in the harsh environment that they had no choice but to be in. Anakin, which was very surprised, asked for only one favor of Boba, and that was to get him a meeting with the Tusken Raider tribe, which Boba could do for him. Anakin, within days, would find himself face to face with the Sand People, the same faces he slaughtered a lifetime ago. He tells them the story of his mother and how he killed an entire tribe for revenge. He would apologize to the Tuskens, asking for their forgiveness, and to his surprise, they would express their regret to his mother's fate, and extend a branch of peace to Anakin, just as they had with Mos Espa under the rule of Boba. Anakin would take up permanent residence in Mos Espa, using his time to attend pod races, frequent local markets, and help anyone that could find in need. Occasionally, Luke, Han, Leia, and the Solo children would visit him, and he would show them where he grew up, where he won the Boonta Eve Classic, where he met his first wife, and the children loved the planet, while Luke, taking after his father, was not a big fan of sand. He did enjoy being back where everything started, though. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is our story. Again, special thanks to George Stewart, Manuel Wells, Jay Hoffman, Warping 308, Icy Raptor, Gort, and Chancellor Lion Sanders for supporting the channel. Let's do tell the likes on this so we can see next video, which is Anakin being trained by Grandmaster Yoda. If you want to see a what if, let me know down below. I remember comments about Dojo crossovers. Check out the Twitch community, Discord, and Patreon, and be part of our communities for many other ways. And if you want to learn how to win a Sideshow collectible, go down below. There's a pinned comment. All you have to do is literally just like the comment, or not go down to the comment, you go to the docs, and then you type your name. I will be doing a giveaway on July 31st at 11:59. We have to hit 35,000 subscribers. We can do it. We are closing in. There's about 11 days, 12 days left until that day. I think we can do it. You guys have to help me out, though. I believe we can do it, and I think we can be giving away one of those Sideshow collectibles. If not, we'll do a giveaway for 50,000. Anyways, let's talk about the story. Again, special thanks to Cameron Hall for writing the story, an extensive and very quite beautiful story. I very much enjoyed reading this, and I have to say there's a little bit of joy for me, and I kind of understand why you guys enjoy these videos, because when you read these stories, it's kind of fun, and it's always fun for me doing a story that was written by somebody else. And let's be real here, Pente Patrol is a plural name, so it does in fact involve the fact that there are other people that can be involved, and that's something I don't want to shy away from. And I'm not egotistical about my stories. I'm not. I really just want to put out the best content I can for you guys, and that's all I care about. All I care about is that. And I think Cameron does a fantastic job at delivering one of those stories here. This story is a very nice mix of legends and canon, and I think he does a brilliant job of including the sequels into this. And I know everyone has their own discrepancies with the sequels, but he takes advantage of something that was that was done in a manner that divided the fandom more than more than anything else. And I think Cameron found a nice way to put it together, to let Anakin be the one to restore the balance, and let Anakin find a way to resolve the pain and suffering that was left behind when he died. And he sets up a very nice political atmosphere that's very reminiscent of kind of what we see in The Phantom Menace, which is a very divided political atmosphere, something that's very not put well together. It's something that's rebuilding, right? And it's something that in Phantom Menace we see is the struggling, and that's the original downfall of the Republic, is the lack of leadership. And Anakin fills that leadership until he doesn't, and then he removes himself from that. And I really like the fact that Anakin goes on a journey. I think Anakin having this journey where he gets to experience a whole new aspect of the Force is all about what bringing balance to the Force is. And you know, I think this story is honestly quite enjoyable. I think this story thrives off of what it is that Anakin is achieving in this, and that is true balance. And honestly, when I gave the prompt to Cameron, I really didn't know how I was going to do this, because I thought it was going to be interesting. I actually didn't give him a prompt, I just gave him a thumbnail. I said, do what you want with this, and he did an amazing job with this. And honestly, having Luke and Vader being teamed up together, and even teaming up together in the end with Cal, which Cal would have probably been in his like 40s by this time or something. Maybe 30s. Maybe 30s? Late 30s maybe? Late 30s, early 40s. But having all these three people go in together would be really interesting. Also having Ezra come back from being lost in the time with Thrawn. I think there's a lot of really cool story that was told here, and I think Cameron did a great job. So I hope you all enjoyed this story. If you have questions, I'm sure Cameron would be loving to respond to them down below. Otherwise, though, I hope you all enjoyed this. I hope you guys are excited for tomorrow's video as well. And as always, my friends, I love you all. Spread the love, and always remember, may the Force be with you.